Cobb TV. Watch your life make sense.
So one question that has always bothered me as a child, and even now that I am a nursing student, I deal with death and dying every day and the beginning of life every day. And I've always struggled with how far should we go in terms of maintaining life at any cost?
The question is simple. What do we think about what life is? Do we think of life like a nurse does? In that case, life is only in the body. It's the life of an animal. It's not a human life. And then, of course, it's very painful that a person lives, is born and dies, and lives and dies, and borns, and then it lives and dies. What kind of life is that? We look at planet Earth from afar, from the universe. It's so small, and look at this petite life on it. Is that our whole life? Of course, it's pointless, that kind of life. But if we consider life as something within a person, that a person has an ability to achieve a spiritual, not an entirely different dimension, something that's not on planet Earth or in the body or in the universe, is a completely different dimension, like a completely different aspect of or perception of life, kind of there beyond the wall. There's a different life, and we can reach that. And that life, the one that we're in right now, was given to us only as a kind of a bridge by which to jump to that grand and beautiful and wholesome life. So then if a person, with your questions, beautiful questions about the meaning of life, if you want to resolve the problem of life, what is life for? Eventually you get to that solution. You begin to see that there is a way through, that there's a reason for life. And, there's a reason for life.
So you're saying basically that since there is such a purpose to life, so we should push to maintain life, to maintain, even though it's in this physical body, to achieve that greater purpose, we should maintain life at any cost?
Well, that is a problem. It depends on the situation the person is in. If a person is in a point where, life becomes pointless, like if you're terminally ill and you can't sustain yourself anymore, people who just suffer and suffer and suffer, and there's nothing in their lives but suffering, then there's a big question here. We haven't worked it out yet. Should you help such a person terminate life? But if a person can, if he still has the strength to go forward to do anything good for himself or for others, then you need to help him.
Well, I guess that brings me to another question. Through my studies, through all the years that I've been sitting in class, one thing that always comes out of my professors' mouths is that nursing is one of the most altruistic professions out there. And I was wondering if that's even possible. Is there an altruistic profession? Does that even exist?
I don't look at it that way. Actually, the word altruism in our world is it's just a replacement of a different kind of ego. We never do anything altruistic. Altruism means you have no intention to profit yourself. And we can't do that, ever. Whenever I give anything, it is always with an intention to somehow have it feedback back to me, come back to me. I want to get a benefit from it. If not today, tomorrow, maybe just get respect out of it. Maybe I'll just feel good about myself that I'm a more important person, a better person. But there's some kind of compensation here, because our substance is the substance and the substance of creation. And that's a desire to enjoy, to receive. And if I don't get something for an act, I can't do that act. I don't have the energy to move. I don't have the motive power for it. So it's impossible that we'll do anything altruistic. But still, there are people who have a more or less inclination towards it, who are more considerate or less considerate of others. So a nurse is indeed a special trade. A person has to be very, very sensitive to the suffering of others on one hand, and on the other hand, you need to be smart enough to not follow that empathy and sympathy, but balance it with my own intellect, this nurse's intellect, and to see what should I really do in order to make life easier for that person.
It's true, there is that constant struggle between the intellect and the empathy side of nursing practice or being in the healthcare industry at all. I was recently on rotation at a neonatal intensive care unit, and I thought about how much effort had been put in to create this being. And most of the children there, most of the infants there had been artificially inseminated, had been created in a petri dish. And I wondered, is this desire to create and maintain life? You said, the healthcare, everything comes from a desire to enjoy. Is it a selfish one?
We, to determine these things, have to know the general law of nature. Why we were born, why the universe was created 15 billion years ago, why it evolved as it did, and then plants and animals and people on Earth, and where we're headed. We're a civilization that's been around for maybe a few tens of thousands of years. And what is our destination? So if we consider the whole of nature, what it wants to do with us, the process that we're going through, then perhaps we'll decide differently. In the end, we are in a situation where it is in our interest to invest, to put effort into life, because we learn from life, from the suffering we experience, from the efforts we make, just to deliver people, to give them life. For 20 years, you put 20 years into a child until a child becomes an adult, and even then, they live for maybe 30 or 40 years at most, and then they grow old, and for 10 or 15 more years, they do nothing. So you have 20 years in the beginning, 20 in the end, of doing nothing, only something in the middle. Why is life arranged that way? It's totally irrational. And our whole lives, look at how much time we waste on sleep, on eating, on what's the point of all those years that we go through. If we look at the general plan of nature, if we study that, we'll understand that it's all happening very precisely to bring a person to the resolution, the answer to the question about the meaning of life. And then the suffering and the efforts and the years and the millennia that we've gone through, suffering will be worth it. And in this generation, we're asking, what are we for? And gradually, humanity is waking up to that question. And I'm truly hopeful that it'll want to resolve that question of what is life for, the meaning of life. And it'll discover a life on a different level, a spiritual one. But all of that is precisely with the help of suffering. And then we will justify all the years of suffering we've experienced throughout history.
So it's purposeful, even though it seems senseless at the moment.
Well, without a purpose, the whole thing is pointless. Then you just need to end your life, and that's it. Just, commit suicide. Without a purpose, life is nothing but one long suffering. As a nurse, you can see that very clearly.
I do see it very clearly. I mean, that question that I asked earlier about this altruistic profession, I wonder, am I doing any good? Am I doing this for myself? Am I going to...
Yes, you are doing good. So that even a person who suffers, that suffering is added to the general suffering of humanity and brings it to the question, Why do I need to suffer? Humanity is beginning to ask itself, specifically today, en masse. People are falling into depression. They're taking drugs. They don't know what to do with themselves. It's like labor pains. You saw deliveries. So it's like labor pains. You have all those pressures before a delivery, and now we have to be born pretty soon.
So what happens at the end of that? I mean, when we are born into that question, and
we will discover that besides the body that you take care of as a nurse, within it, there's another kind of place, or it's called a kli, a vessel, a part that has nothing to do with the current life. It's from a different dimension. It's as if we're aliens that came from another planet, and we're here on Earth. And our lives are really up there on that planet, and we have to go back there. That's how it'll appear to people. And then we'll rise not to another planet, but to another dimension, and live there with a sensation of a truly eternal and perfect and good life. And the suffering we're suffering now is only so that we decide that we want to go back home.
Well, it's hard to be satisfied with that answer. I mean, I can't tell a person that is sitting there, that is laying there, that's suffering, that this is purposeful. And when a child dies, as they say, before their time.
No, Dina. No, that's wrong. You're wrong. If you tell that person that there is a goal and a reason and benefit from the suffering, it'll make it easier on them. They'll want to hear it. They will. Because if you can't justify suffering, it's very hard to suffer. Why suffer? I don't know. It's too hard. But if I know that for this suffering I'm getting some kind of reward, that there's a benefit, it makes it easier. I'll be happy. Try it.
I will.